After Amy left, Shirone squatted down and quietly picked up his school bag. He muttered, his voice full of dissatisfaction. Well, I guess this is better than being expelled. I admit that her schematic ability is top-notch, but it's unfair to have to do everything her way. Shirone covered his face and sighed in frustration. It had only just begun, but he already saw a mountain of difficulties piled up before his eyes. The next day, the atmosphere in the school was bustling. Everyone was bustling towards the library, as if being swept away by an invisible wave. Suddenly, the students were in an uproar, their eyes fixed on one point. One person shouted to his friend, "Hey, look at that!" Shirone, holding a cup of coffee, leisurely walked over. All around, whispers rose like waves. "What is it? He's a new student, right? Oh my God, what's going on?" Shirone stopped, standing in the middle of the curious crowd. He looked straight ahead, then gently raised the coffee cup with both hands, pointing it towards Amy. His voice was not loud, but it was clear, echoing enough for everyone to hear. "Here you are, Senior Amy." Immediately, everyone's eyes turned to Amy, as if she was the center of an unexpected drama. "Your coffee," Shirone repeated, his voice calm but meaningful. Cerielle stood beside her, patting Amy's shoulder gently, covering her mouth and whispering in surprise, "No way, Amy. What's going on?" Amy gently lifted her hair, her red eyes flashing like fire. She reached out and snatched the coffee cup from Shirone's hand, her tone mocking. "Oh my God, you must be doing a lot of errands for me." Then, without looking back, Amy turned and walked away. Cerielle was surprised, calling out, "Are you just going like that?" Amy replied coldly, her voice calm, "We have to hurry to school. There's no time left." Shirone stood there, his face as red as a ripe eggplant. He looked at Amy's back, muttering angrily, "What the hell is this?" The surrounding students began to whisper, like a swarm of bees. One person exclaimed, "Oh my God, did he just confess to Amy?" But Amy just ignored him and left without saying anything. How pitiful. Cerielle hurried after Amy and asked curiously, "Do you think that new student likes you?" Amy shook her head, her lips curling into a mischievous smile. "That's not it. I was just teaching my junior a little lesson." Although Amy appeared calm on the outside, she was dancing happily inside, filled with joy. While sipping her coffee, she thought to herself, "See, Shirone, this is the humiliation that the great Amy bestowed upon you." A dramatic scenario appeared in Amy's mind. She smiled mischievously, thinking to herself, "With this performance, you will be immediately placed on the list of juniors who secretly admire Amy Karmis." She even imagined that even if Shirone stood in the middle of the schoolyard and shouted, "Amy Karmis is a perverted thug," the crowd would just click their tongues and sigh, "Oh my, he must want revenge because he was rejected." Amy was certain that from now on, no matter what Shirone said, no one would believe him anymore. She hummed softly as she walked, thinking to herself, what could be sweeter than a perfect revenge? Cerielle walked beside her, looking at Amy in a daze. He looked so happy, she thought, but she had no idea what was going on. Amy, on the other hand, felt a sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. It felt so good, as if all the worries of the past 5 years had suddenly vanished without a trace. In Amy's mind, joy was like a drumbeat, bustling and satisfying. She felt like she had just achieved a great victory. Meanwhile, Shirone stood in the middle of the crowd as if his energy had been drained, drowning in the sea of people. He thought to himself, full of resentment, "This is clearly bullying. What did I do to offend her?" Shirone clenched his fists, his heart in turmoil. But then, he told himself, if I continue to indulge in negative thoughts, I will be the only one who suffers. I can't let her win so easily. He raised his head, a glimmer of determination in his eyes. If I have to do it, I will do it perfectly. My feelings depend on my thoughts, no one else. Shirone told himself, as if he had just found the fire in his heart again, and then from then on, everything began to change. 10 days passed, and the entire academy was bustling like a swarm of bees. Whispers spread everywhere. "He's here again! He's here again today," a student shouted, his voice filled with excitement. The story of a romantic and innocent boy at the Magic Academy spread everywhere. For 10 consecutive days, Shirone confessed nonstop, like a storm sweeping through the school. The crowd cheered, eagerly waiting for the news, turning every day into a bustling drama. In front of the library, Amy and Cerielle stood there, their eyes on Shirone. The crowd was still noisy, and both girls seemed to be caught up in the story unfolding before their eyes. Amy burst out laughing, her eyes sparkling as she noticed the crowd gathering towards them. Behind Shirone, a sea of curious people were watching intently, as if waiting for a climax. Amy grinned slyly, thinking to herself, with this many people, the whole academy probably knows about this. Should we slowly end this act? Suddenly, Cerielle, standing next to her, spoke up, her voice curious. "Hey, Amy, when are you going to accept Shirone's feelings?" The question was like a sudden blow that made Amy freeze, her mouth wide open. Huh? What did you just say, Cerielle? She raised her voice full of dissatisfaction. Why should I accept that guy? Have you forgotten who I am? Cerielle thought for a moment, then replied, her voice calm. But don't you see? Rumors are spreading everywhere. Besides, the truth is, you don't even glance at other people. But every time Shirone brings coffee, you accept it all. Cerielle's words were like a thunderbolt. Amy was stunned, feeling as if the world was spinning. She thought to herself, what? Are people expecting a legendary couple to be born? The surrounding crowd was still whispering, as if the entire academy was ready to witness a brilliant love story come true. In Amy's mind, only 3 words echoed, what's going on? In front of her, another cup of coffee was brought. Shirone smiled, his voice gentle but full of confidence. Senior, here's your coffee. As soon as he finished speaking, the students below immediately became noisy, as if a market had broken out, shouting in unison, agree, agree. Shirone looked straight at Amy, leisurely continuing. I didn't spill a single drop of coffee this time, right? But in his heart, he was anxious, secretly urging, hurry up, accept it. I still have to run to the library. Amy gritted her teeth. Her red eyes now seemed to be on fire. Not only that, even her cheeks were flushed. She silently screamed in her mind. How did it turn out like this? Are you guys kidding me? Tension rose. Amy looked at Shirone, her face flushed. Suddenly, she was startled into action. Her hand swung up, knocking over the cup of coffee in Shirone's hand, her voice irritated. So annoying. The coffee cup fell and shattered. Cerielle and the surrounding students were stunned and bewildered. Cerielle quickly covered her mouth and shouted, Amy! The coffee cup shattered, spilling liquid all over the ground. Amy stood there, pointing straight at Shirone, her voice cold. Do you think I would fall in love with you just because of this? She waved her hand, shouting, as a student, focus on studying. Don't follow girls around and bother them. Then, without looking back, Amy turned and walked away, throwing back a sentence. Don't ever give me these things again. Cerielle hurriedly turned to Shirone, flustered. Sorry, please forgive me. She called out, Hey, Amy. The surrounding crowd was as noisy as a beehive, whispering, Oh my God, was I rejected so harshly? Cerielle ran after Amy, worriedly asking, What's going on? What are you going to do if these rumors spread? Amy snapped, her voice full of annoyance. Who cares? Those guys must be so bored and full of fat. She raised her voice and declared firmly, Once we graduate, everything will be over. Outside, on the stairs, Shirone quietly bent down to pick up the broken coffee cup. The chatter continued. One student whispered, I bet she's an ice princess. That's why she did that. Another added, we should report Amy for wasting coffee, poor Shirone. Shirone stood there, stunned, his mind reeling. Really? I don't have to do this anymore? He hugged his school bag tightly, slowly standing up. The girls around him whispered, their voices filled with sympathy. Oh my God, look at him. He looks so miserable, so pitiful. But in complete contrast to the gossip, Shirone's lips curled slightly, his eyes flashing with light. He thought to himself, feeling relieved, I'm free. That night, in the library, Amy put her head down on the book in front of her, irritably muttering, Damn it. She looked up abruptly, crumpling the pen in her hand, thinking, I have to stop the freshmen from spreading the rumor. I started this, so if I can put a stop to it before it spreads, everything will be fine. But then she shook her head, telling herself, No, that's not the most important thing. Amy's eyes were glowing, red like fire. The red eyes of Karmis, the eyes known as reflective memory, lit up with power. In an instant, the scenery around her changed completely. The library disappeared, and Amy found herself sitting in the middle of the academy grounds, as if time and space had been warped. Karmis Red Eye, a special skill that allowed Amy to record every moment she experienced like a vivid movie in her mind. She closed her eyes and the image of Shirone appeared clearly. He stood there timidly, handing over the cup of coffee, his voice hesitant. Senior, here is your coffee. For 10 consecutive days, every time she encountered Shirone, Amy activated Karmis Red Eye. She memorized every detail, the way Shirone looked when doing chores, every gesture, every look. Amy gritted her teeth and muttered, the first day, he seemed to enjoy it. But when she flipped through the memories of the following 9 days, what stunned her was nothing had changed. Shirone was still the same, from the way he stood, the way he handed over the coffee, to his unwavering gaze. Amy frowned and muttered. His gaze didn't change even a little bit. Not even the irises moved. She delved into her memory, studying each image as if she were analyzing a mystery. What does this mean? Amy asked herself, her voice low and serious. She knew one thing, no matter how well someone tried to hide their emotions, their eyes would always betray them. But with Shirone, they were like a wall, not revealing even a trace of true emotion. Amy suddenly realized something that made her shudder. If Shirone could control his gaze to the point of perfection, then his autonomic nervous system was almost impossible to control. Her eyes flashed, red like fire. He controls his emotions like a machine. She closed her eyes, closed the book, and muttered, or he's completely honest. A conclusion that even she was stunned by. Cerielle, who was sitting next to her, noticed Amy's actions. She asked softly, her voice filled with curiosity, "Oh, Amy, are you done?" Amy stood up, packed up her books, and said tiredly, "I'm a little tired today." Cerielle also wanted to stand up, suggesting, "Then let's go home together." But Amy shook her head, refusing immediately. "No, you don't have to do that for me. I want to go alone." Cerielle worriedly looked at Amy intently. "Do you feel guilty for not accepting Shirone's cup of coffee?" Amy was almost speechless and angrily replied, "I told you not to." Cerielle still did not give up and added, "If you want to talk about anything, just tell me." Amy just walked away silently, her heart filled with confused thoughts. Amy nodded, her voice bland. "Yeah, thanks." She walked out of the library, feeling drained of energy. Muttering to herself, Amy lamented, "Oh my gosh, I'm so tired. Things aren't going according to plan. My mind is all messed up." She pushed the door open and walked out, thinking to herself, "I need to rest a bit." Suddenly a voice rang out, "You're leaving early today?" Amy paused, recognizing the person who had spoken. "Jake Artius," she thought to herself. Jake winked, smiling mischievously. "I thought you had to wait for me until midnight." Amy frowned, replying, "Why did you have to wait for me? Are you that free?" Jake approached, his tone mocking. "Don't be so cruel. I've heard the rumors. I heard there's a sissy named Shirone chasing you." Amy held her head, frustrated. "Oh my God, no way. Are you here to laugh at me? My head is about to explode." "Of course not." Jake laughed, holding out a cup of coffee. "Come on here, take this. This is some great Western coffee." Jake winked, his tone confident. "You can't find anyone in this school who is worthy of you. The wonderful Amy must be treated as she deserves." Amy frowned, her voice full of annoyance. "What the hell are you doing?" Jake laughed, taking a step forward. "As you can see, I'm trying to win your heart. Unlike that effeminate Shirone, you, the one who will inherit the position of Minister of the Royal Treasury, are clearly much more worthy of me." Amy couldn't hide her disgust, coldly replying, "I have no interest in playing these disgusting games with you." Jake was stunned, repeating, "Disgusting?" Amy continued, her voice sharp. "That's right, and I don't think we're close enough to talk like this." She looked straight into his eyes, exposing, "Do you think I don't know that your group always tries to bring me down whenever they have the chance?" Jake was flustered, hastily explaining, "Wait, Amy, I think it's just a misunderstanding." Jake frowned, his tone harsh. "Aren't the words you said to me a bit too much?" He held a steaming cup of coffee, approached Amy, his eyes cold. "If you insult me, it's the same as insulting my entire family. I won't forgive anyone who dares to touch my family's honor." Jake narrowed his eyes, revealing a meaningful smile. "As a member of the famous Karmis family, you should understand that, right?" Amy replied coldly, her voice devoid of emotion. "Pathetic." Jake was stunned, his mouth gaping. "What?" Amy didn't show any respect, looked straight at his face, and continued, "Just because you have a little reputation in school, you think you can be so arrogant towards people who don't support your family?" She smiled contemptuously. "A person who founded a strange association, secretly insulting others, dares to open his mouth to talk about honor?" Jake bared his teeth, revealing a despicable smile. He held his forehead and cursed Amy in an angry voice. Jake roared, his voice full of resentment. "You bitch! You think you're being arrogant just because you're famous, right?" He shouted loudly, his face red. "Do you think your Karmis family is invincible? Your family may be the leader in some areas, but not in power." He took a step forward, forcing Amy to retreat. "With my family's power, I can drain your Karmis family's finances." Jake's eyes flashed, looking down at Amy from above, gritting his teeth. "Do you understand now?" Amy laughed, her voice cold as ice. "Oh, I understand." She looked straight at Jake and continued bluntly, "That's right. Those eyes are truly those of a bad guy." She carefully observed his distorted face, commenting without any respect, "Unlike Shirone, your eyes look like those of a dead fish." Amy's words were like a thunderbolt. Jake was stunned, not believing his ears, stammering, "What?" Jake roared, his face red as if he was about to go crazy. "You dare say that I am not as good as that awkward guy?" He gritted his teeth, his voice filled with anger. "That's right, I've let things go too far. Before I completely crush you, I won't interfere any further." Jake's next words were like adding fuel to the fire, making Amy's blood boil. "I swear, in just one day, I will make that guy never use magic again." He declared fiercely, "I will show you how great I am." But before he could finish, Amy had already knocked over the coffee cup in his hand. The coffee cup fell to the ground, shattering into pieces, the liquid splashing everywhere. Amy looked at Jake coldly, her voice as sharp as a knife. "This is my answer." Jake gritted his teeth, his face distorted with anger. You arrogant bitch. My patience has its limits, no matter how beautiful you are. Suddenly his pupils contracted, his eyes filled with panic. Amy opened her spirit field. She stood there calm but powerful, looking straight at Jake, her voice harsh. What did you just say? Amy's crimson eyes flashed in the darkness, like two blazing flames. She gritted her teeth, each word sharp. Who did you just say you were going to do? Jake trembled, thinking, she can activate the four forms so quickly? He hesitated, trying to stay calm. Are you crazy? You know that using magic here is against the rules, right? Amy burst out laughing, her laughter filled with mockery. The wind began to blow violently in the closed corridor, blowing everything away. She mocked. What a guy who only knows how to show off his appearance. At least Shirone doesn't rely on his family background. Amy looked straight at Jake, her voice full of pride. He's someone who knows how to take responsibility for his actions. I bet you can't catch up with him in half a year, right? Jake's veins popped out. He gritted his teeth in anger, wanting to scream, this bitch is really, but in his mind, a worrying thought flashed. She's covering the entire hallway with a whirlwind. If I make a move, will she really attack? He stood there, motionless, calculating, while the wind continued to howl around Amy like a storm. Jake thought to himself, full of bitterness, I can't fight against the head of this magic academy. But he glanced at Amy, his hands gripping the railing tightly, preparing his stance. It's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge after 10 years, he muttered, then turned and ran down the stairs, shouting back, don't think this is the end. Amy leaned against the wall, exhaled, and muttered, it's been a long time since I've been this agitated. She asked herself, why did I do that? Because he threatened me? Or because he knows my secret? Suddenly, memories of Shirone flashed through her mind. In the forest, he had said to her sincerely, if doing these things can make you trust me, I will do it. Amy turned away, her eyes stopping on the puddle of coffee on the floor. She cursed, her voice full of annoyance. Damn it, he definitely won't come tomorrow. The moon outside was already high, shining brightly. Amy muttered, but felt relieved in her heart. Anyway, thanks to him, my mind is no longer troubled. A few days later, the atmosphere at the academy became heavy. Cerielle stood there, her eyes brimming with tears. The storm that Amy had caused had not yet subsided. In her hand was a piece of paper. The handwriting was scribbled. I made Shirone go to the 14th training center at 6 o'clock in the evening before I attacked him. If you dare to tell the teacher, I will make you regret it for the rest of your life. Shirone finished reading, looked up at Cerielle standing beside him, and said in a deep voice, so Senior Amy went there to save me? In the bottom corner of the paper, the words Dark Mage were signed arrogantly. These events were like a tsunami, sweeping the entire academy into a vortex. The bell in the high tower rang, signaling the start of class. The students flocked in, whispering as they walked. Shirone walked, holding a book in her hand, her eyes glued to the page. All around, people recognized him and whispered, hey, he's the one flirting with Senior Amy. It's fun, but somehow it feels so awkward. The chatter was like an undercurrent that couldn't be stopped. Shirone sighed in frustration and muttered, oh my God. He still couldn't forget what happened 4 days ago when Amy had knocked over his cup of coffee. Shirone felt like he was crying silently, and he thought shyly, how can I dare to raise my head from now on? He raised the book to cover his mouth, cleared his throat, and said to himself, in situations like this, just smile confidently. Those people won't tease me forever. It seems like they've stopped doubting me. Suddenly, a figure in front of him caught Shirone's eye. Oh, that's Senior Cerielle, he realized. Seeing Cerielle standing alone, Shirone wondered, that's strange. She's usually with Senior Amy. Is something wrong? He walked over and greeted politely, Senior Cerielle. But as soon as he finished speaking, Cerielle suddenly shouted, startling Shirone, who shouted along as well. She rushed forward, grabbed his collar, and said in a panic, why are you here? Where is Amy? Shirone was shaken by Cerielle until he staggered and hurriedly asked, why are you suddenly asking that? Cerielle pressed the paper close to his face, her voice filled with panic. Look, shouldn't you be in trouble right now? Shirone widened his eyes, bewildered. What? On the paper, the scribbled handwriting clearly stated, Shirone is in my hands. If you want to save him, come to the 14th training hall before 6 o'clock in the afternoon. If you dare to report to the teacher, you will regret it for the rest of your life. At the bottom, the signature, Dark Mage. Shirone stared at the paper and asked in confusion, I was kidnapped? He turned to Cerielle, his voice filled with doubt. Who is this person, Dark Mage? 30 minutes ago, Amy and Cerielle were walking in the schoolyard when a voice rang out. Are you okay, Senior? Cerielle frowned and muttered, it's him again. Amy replied coldly, her voice as sharp as a knife. Didn't I tell you to get lost? How dare you open your mouth to talk to me? The blonde man grinned, his smile fake. It would be better if you were less arrogant. He shook the paper in his hand, his voice mocking. The boss said he wants to see you. Cerielle pulled Amy's hand, trying to drag her away, ignoring him. Leave him alone. Amy coldly said, no wonder he's only at level 5. The blonde man didn't give up, continuing. The boss said if he gave you this paper, you would listen immediately. He curled his lips. If you don't want your boyfriend to get into trouble, you should obediently accept it. Cerielle frowned, looking at him like he was crazy. What did you just say? Disgusting, you filthy thing. She turned to Amy, urging, let's go. We're going to the library right away. But suddenly Amy turned around, snatching the paper from the blonde man's hand. Oh, he exclaimed, surprised. Cerielle called out in panic, Amy! Amy bent down and read the paper carefully. The words on it made her stunned. Shirone is kidnapped. Jake's image immediately appeared in her mind. She remembered what he had said, his voice full of hatred. I swear I will make sure she can never use magic again. Amy gritted her teeth and cursed in her heart. Jake, you bastard. She clenched the paper in her hand, then suddenly shouted, so what? With a flick of her hand, Amy threw the paper to the ground, her voice cold. What does his business have to do with me? Cerielle was stunned, bent down to pick up the paper, and asked, what is this? The blonde man shrugged, raised his hand in a mocking salute. Whatever. I'm just a postman. Cerielle opened the paper and read it, muttering, dark magicians, those bad guys who bully excellent students. She frowned, wondering, what did they capture Shirone for? What does it have to do with you? Amy bit her lip, worried. That day, I really couldn't control myself, so I retaliated against him. Cerielle hurriedly urged, go tell the professor. She continued, her voice filled with worry. Not only Shirone, but you could be in danger too. Amy muttered, Professor, it's true, but it won't be that simple. She imagined being called into the conference room. If the faculty intervened, the investigation would dig into everything, and she knew that at that point, all the secrets could be exposed. Amy thought to herself, her heart heavy, if that happens, I'll be forced to reveal my relationship with Shirone, and my past will be exposed. Shirone's image flashed through her mind. If this gets out, they'll find out, his pitiful expression flashed through Amy's mind. A commoner, a non-noble. She recalled what she had said, her voice full of sarcasm. It must be hard for a commoner like you to get into this academy, right? It would be a shame if you had to drop out halfway, right? And Shirone's reply, so sincere it was heartbreaking, if doing so would make you trust me, I'm willing. Amy's thoughts drifted back to 5 years ago. A painful memory flashed, the image of a person lying on the ground, mumbling, it's not me. She was stunned as if she saw Shirone lying on the ground, broken, begging desperately. Please. Amy clenched her fists, her fingernails digging into her palms. She turned, her voice determined. Cerielle. Amy shoved her bag into Cerielle's hand, saying quickly, I'm going. If I don't come back, you tell the professor right away, okay? Cerielle was startled and shouted, What? Why did you do that? She watched Amy's figure fade away, her voice filled with worry. What can you do if you go alone? Do you know how many of them there are? Amy turned around, her eyes determined. Sorry, but I have my reasons. Don't worry about me. She smiled confidently. Even if there were 10 bastards like Jake, they wouldn't be able to do anything to me. Back in the present, Shirone held the paper and muttered, so. He looked at Cerielle, his voice filled with disbelief. Senior Amy went to save me? Shirone was in turmoil. No way, a cunning person like her, he asked urgently. She really went alone? What should we do now? Cerielle replied, her voice filled with worry. Amy said she had her reasons. This is the first time she asked me to do something like that. Amy told me to wait until 7 o'clock. Shirone rubbed his chin and sighed. There really is no other way. Shirone pondered, thinking about why Amy didn't want to tell the professor. He pulled out his watch to check the time, thinking to himself, she wants to keep it a secret between us. So, she and I are on the same side. He thought for a moment, realizing that Amy had agreed to go alone to protect that secret. Shirone turned to Cerielle with a slap and declared, I have to go too. He threw his bag on the table with a slap and quickly said, Senior, just wait until then. Cerielle called out in panic, wait, but Shirone had already turned around and ran away. As he ran, he thought, Hall 14 is in the direction of the mountain. Will I make it in time? Suddenly, Shirone's feet left the ground. Cerielle had hugged him and was flying up. She shouted, when will we get there if we run? Let me go with you. Then she loudly ordered, get ready. I'm about to teleport. Hold on tight, Cerielle shouted. Shirone was confused and stammered, what do you mean? A bright yellow light flashed beside him. Shirone looked down and saw that his hands were surrounded by a pale yellow halo. In the blink of an eye, both of them disappeared into the sky. Shirone screamed in panic, his scream echoing. Below the building, several students were walking around, looking up and pointing in confusion. What was that? Did someone just use magic? One exclaimed, eyes wide as he watched the streak of light streak across the sky. Shirone's eyes widened, his heart pounding. The scenery around him changed rapidly, and his destination appeared before his eyes, a dense forest. Cerielle hugged Shirone tightly, suddenly stopping. If you hit a tree while teleporting, you're dead, she said, her voice serious. From here, flying is the safest. Before Shirone could react, she immediately hugged him and flew up again. A moment later, Cerielle landed on the ground in Hall 14. Shirone was shaking, holding onto a tree trunk to keep his balance, his face pale. He hugged the tree, vomiting profusely, green and yellow bile pouring out, his mind still reeling, unable to come to his senses. Meanwhile, Cerielle didn't stop for a second. As soon as she landed, she ran, shouting loudly, Amy! Where are you, Amy? Cerielle was worried, looking around. No one is here. How strange. It's 10 minutes earlier than the appointment time. Shirone wiped his mouth, his voice thoughtful. Maybe they changed the location. The letter was leaked, so they tried to avoid the teacher's eyes. Cerielle spoke loudly, her voice filled with panic. Then what about Amy? Shirone frowned, thinking, this plan is really elaborate. Secrets, the past, everything is intertwined. Now is not the time to worry about being a commoner or any other secrets. Both she and I could be suspended. This situation is much more dangerous than I thought. He turned to Cerielle, his voice resolute. Senior, go back and report this to the professor immediately. Shirone looked forward, his eyes determined. If Senior goes alone, it will be much faster. Cerielle hesitated, but Amy told me to wait until 7 o'clock. Shirone shook his head, his voice soft but resolute. It's okay. It's all because of me that this is happening. Shirone looked at Cerielle, his voice resolute. I will help her, so it's fine. Senior, go quickly. Cerielle was stunned, exclaiming, what? She held her head, shouting, Amy's important reason is you. What is the relationship between you two? Are you two really secretly dating? Is there something I don't know? Shirone hurriedly interrupted, his voice full of urgency. We don't have time. The longer we delay, the more dangerous things will be. Cerielle blinked, sobered up, and nodded. All right, remember to wait here. Waiting for Cerielle to run away, Shirone breathed a sigh of relief, muttering, the mountain is familiar terrain for me. He stood in the middle of the forest, activating his spirit domain. Closing his eyes, Shirone concentrated intensely, whispering, I will definitely find traces. His spirit domain spread out, covering the entire forest. Suddenly, Shirone's eyes lit up. Here it is. He discovered footprints on the ground. Shirone followed the footprints, walking carefully. The footprints of two people. Very new, not long ago, he muttered. But suddenly the footprints stopped halfway. Did they fly away? Shirone frowned, thinking. Suddenly, a sound rang out in the forest, startling him. The sound of branches breaking. Shirone jumped up, his eyes turned towards the smoke rising from deep in the forest. Don't tell me something happened, he whispered, his heart pounding. Deep in the forest, a voice spoke, full of resentment. I slipped. The blonde man, the one who had delivered the letter to Amy, grinned. Oh my God, I almost hit you with the silver cannon, Amy. I wanted to give you a grand welcome. Amy glanced at the red fire burning beside her, her eyes cold. Above, a few new figures appeared, landed on the ground, surrounding Amy. One of the guys sneered, Big Sister Amy is really here. She caught such a big fish, she is our boss. But another guy interrupted, nonsense. Jake, the leader of the thugs, stepped out, his eyes sly. He smirked, looking at Amy defiantly. Jake curled his lips, his voice sarcastic. Amy, this is our honored guest. Don't be rude. Amy stood in the middle of the circle, arms crossed, her cold eyes scanning the crowd. I thought so, but it turns out they're just a bunch of idle brats who don't know how to do anything besides eat meat, she said, her voice full of contempt. Jake stepped forward and asked, did you really come here alone? Is that brat important to you that you risked your life to come here? Amy replied, her voice cold as ice. It's just catching mice. There's no need to burn down the whole house. Jake gritted his teeth, so angry that he laughed. Still being arrogant? With so many people here, I'm afraid you won't be able to satisfy yourself. He narrowed his eyes. His petty gaze swept over Amy. This time, I've calculated everything carefully. Amy didn't care, her voice calm but sharp. Whatever you plan is your business. I don't care. Where's Shirone? Amy's question made the whole Jake group burst into laughter. One of them jerked his chin and said mockingly, where else could it be? The blonde sneered, his voice full of mockery. He's probably still buried in books at the library. He doesn't even know that his girlfriend is about to get into big trouble. He shouted, imitating the voice, Book, I love you. Then he turned to his friends, smirking, wherever he is, I don't care. They all stared at Amy, their eyes filled with hatred. One of them growled, "We only care about you. The guys here are crazy about revenge." Jake stepped forward threatening, "I'm still very angry about last night. If you have a grudge, you'll have to take care of yourself." Amy let out a breath, her eyes cold. "Shirone isn't here?" "That's easy." She smiled, her voice calm but full of challenge. "Like you said, with all these eyes watching, it's a bit annoying." Suddenly, Amy's body lit up with a bright green light. She said, her voice firm, "Because having to clean up all this trash at once, it's a bit of a pain." The Jakes were stunned, their eyes wide. "What?" Jake panicked, sweat pouring down like a shower. He muttered, his voice trembling, "No, it can't be." Before Jake and the others could understand what was happening, Amy launched a straight attack at the blonde man behind. The fire flared up, burning his arm. He screamed in pain, "It's too hot." The rest of the group immediately became chaotic, shouting, "That girl, she's really throwing fire." Jake shouted as he ran, "Calm down and get out of the way." He raised his voice full of tension. This kind of attack isn't effective against such a large number. Cowardly as his nature, Jake quickly flew up, dragging a few others with him, trying to avoid the attack and return to his original position. But Amy's spirit field had already spread, covering the entire group. Jake was stunned before he could react. Boom! A loud explosion sounded right where he was. Amy stood below, calm as if nothing had happened. She waved her hand slightly, her crimson eyes flashing sharply. "Come to work with me," she growled. Amy's spirit field turned into countless rays of light, sweeping away the entire group without leaving anyone behind. Amy concentrated her strength. The fire flared up as if it wanted to burn everything. Boom! A loud explosion. She launched countless fireballs in all directions. The fireballs flew out without any pattern. The thugs held their heads and dodged, shouting in panic, "Hey, why did you say she only trained in the attack form? Why is the fire throwing speed so fast?" One of them didn't have time to dodge and was sent flying by the fireball, rolling on the ground. Jake gritted his teeth, cursing under his breath, "Fuck, what the hell is this?" He was stunned and realized this level is completely different from the training ground. Could it be that she has actual combat experience? Jake shouted, "It's so hot!" He quickly flew up thinking, no matter how powerful your skills are, there will always be weaknesses. Floating in the air, he looked down at Amy, calculating, to resist the horizontal attack, I have to attack from the vertical axis. On the ground, Amy stood firm, wind starting to gather into a tornado in her palm, ready for the next strike. Jake gathered all his strength, roared, and attacked Amy. Windblade. The sharp windblade swooped down from above, gradually pressing closer to Amy. Seeing that she seemed to have no way to avoid it, Jake grinned triumphantly, "You're done for." But just as the windblade was about to reach, Amy quickly leaned back, narrowly dodging the attack. Jake's eyes widened and he shouted, "Oh my God, how could..." Amy looked at him, curling her lips in mockery. "This is called force, you idiot." She raised her hand, her voice cold. "Fire attack." Amy's spirit realm locked onto Jake as a target. He roared and cursed. "Fuck." A giant fireball flew straight towards him, hitting Jake, sending him flying a few meters away. Jake went crazy, growling, "You bitch." Amy stepped forward, smiling gently but sarcastically. "Because you're always busy with these useless things, your results are always so bad." Jake gritted his teeth, his eyes flashing with hatred. He raised his hand and roared, "You don't even think about looking down on me." Amy sneered, her voice cold. "Don't resist in vain. This time, I won't let you off so easily." Suddenly, a purple light struck Amy's crimson eyes. A strange force rushed in, causing her body to be nailed to the spot. Amy was bewildered, holding her face in pain and screaming, "What the hell is this?" Jake's men appeared at the same time, surrounding Amy, launching a series of attacks at the same time. More force finally caught him. Jake grinned, "Surprised, you arrogant lion?" Amy's spirit domain began to disintegrate. Jake triumphantly, "If you don't dispel the spirit domain, you'll go crazy," he smirked. "This encirclement is an anti-magic spell, understand?" Amy gritted her teeth and cursed, "You bastard." Her crimson eyes flashed fiercely, but Amy cursed inwardly, "Damn it. Red eyes can't even help me recover." She roared, her voice filled with anger. "You dare to use forbidden magic." A fierce wind blew, tightly wrapping Amy's hands. In a flash, both her hands and feet were tied. Jake laughed loudly, his voice triumphant. "I finally caught you, you bitch." He stroked his hair, slowly approaching Amy, his eyes sly. "How do you feel, honey? Have you reconsidered my proposal yesterday?" From somewhere, Jake pulled out a dagger, the blade flashing under the moonlight. He threatened, "You better think carefully. See, I don't mind committing a crime." Amy gritted her teeth, her eyes red with fire. "I warned you. If you dare to play tricks, I will kill you. But in her heart, Amy was confused. I can't take it off. The diagram is useless. I haven't been able to practice since I was 12. Damn it. Floating in the air, she tried to stay calm, thinking, I have to find a way to escape. Jake laughed loudly, his voice full of mockery. Looks like you still know what you're in for, huh? Jake caressed the dagger, his eyes flashing with malice. I heard you hate men who follow you to the neck, right? Let me help you. He smiled shamelessly, moving closer to Amy. Just one swipe from me, and I guarantee they'll automatically stay away from you. The red blade was just inches away from Amy's face. Jake gloated, his voice triumphant. I've wanted to do this for a long time. You should have been in this miserable state from the beginning. The tip of the dagger hovered before Amy's eyes. Jake's rambling voice rang in her ears. You should have knelt down and begged me from the beginning. He ordered, his voice cold. Speak. Amy closed her eyes tightly, gritting her teeth. Damn it, I don't have the strength anymore, she thought, her heart filled with despair. Suddenly, memories from 5 years ago flooded back. The alley, the image of Shirone lying on the ground, helpless. So, this is how he feels, Amy whispered, her heart aching. At the critical moment, a shout rang out, Stop! Amy opened her eyes and looked towards the sound. Shirone appeared holding a piece of wood in his hand, his eyes blazing with anger. He roared and cursed, You dirty rags! Jake's group was stunned. Jake's eyes widened, stammering, That guy. Amy was even more surprised than Jake, exclaiming, You. Shirone breathed heavily, his hands gripping the log, his eyes burning as he stared at the thugs. Jake laughed mockingly. What's wrong? Did you come alone? He twirled the dagger in his hand, his voice mocking. The prince is here! His comrades immediately followed suit, sneering. The prince! No matter what you do, it's useless! Amy shouted, her voice filled with anger. You idiot! Why did you come alone? Shirone was speechless, his mind quickly calculating. Even though they are outnumbered, do you think they can suppress the leader of the intermediate students like Amy? No way! He thought to himself, Senior Cerielle must have informed the teacher by now. I just need to buy some time. Shirone's spirit field erupted, surrounding his body like a beam of light. He told himself, strengthening his confidence, I once defeated Rian with swordsmanship. I can do it. Shirone's eyes flashed with determination, ready to face the group. Shirone roared, his voice filled with determination. Release Senior Amy now. He rushed towards the thugs, still holding the log tightly. Jake sneered, his voice full of mockery. Are you crazy? Release her so you two can attack us together? The blonde turned to Jake, surprised. That idiot only knows how to run straight towards us? Jake curled his lips, ordering, You guys, open up. The thugs stood still, their eyes fixed on Shirone. At this moment, Shirone suddenly realized something was wrong. Something is wrong, he thought, a sense of unease rising in his heart. Suddenly, Shirone's spirit field shattered, just like Amy's earlier. His eyes were stunned, filled with horror. The log in his hand fell to the ground. Shirone held his head, screaming in pain. He fell to the ground amidst the mocking laughter of Jake's group. The prince really did not disappoint me. Jake laughed loudly, his voice full of sarcasm. What are you going to do to a mage with that staff? Amy shouted, her voice urgent. Shirone, remove the spirit domain now. That's anti-magic. Shirone knelt on the ground, holding his head in pain, muttering, Magic resistance, this thing? Amy continued to scream, her voice urgent. You might lose the ability to use magic forever. Quickly remove the spirit domain, or you'll go crazy. Are you listening to me? But Shirone only heard a vague echo. His senses seemed to be fading, his consciousness gradually crumbling. In that moment, he remembered what Professor Atella had said. Magicians must maintain concentration to survive on the chaotic battlefield. Shirone held his head tightly, trying to think. This form of defense, it prevents the spirit domain from collapsing under most interruptions. Even if it is subjected to physical shock, it will still hold. It is also effective against psychological attack, magic. Professor Atella's voice seemed to echo in his ears. After all, magic resistance and spirit power are just ripples. Shirone gritted his teeth, trying to concentrate, determined to find a way to resist the magic that was invading his mind. Shirone held his head, painfully enduring the mental torture of the spirit domain being attacked. He thought to himself, if I increase the density of the spirit domain to the point where it can't be penetrated, Shirone looked down at his trembling hand, focusing all his consciousness, trying to rebuild the spirit domain. The blonde man's eyes widened in surprise. What? Is he trying to endure? Jake sneered, his voice full of sarcasm. He wants to act like an A-class student, even though he's just a freshman. Shirone roared, his voice filled with determination. Increase the efficiency. Amy panicked, shouting loudly, Give up, you idiot. There are too many of them. You can't take it. But Jake and the others were stunned, exclaiming in unison, "What?" They saw Shirone's spirit domain being reestablished, layers of light gradually appearing. What the hell is this? The planes of the spirit domain became more and more solid, like an unbreakable wall. Shirone slowly stood up, his eyes burning. He gritted his teeth and whispered, "Half a step more. I need another piece of glass." He used all his strength, trying to concentrate on completing the spirit domain. Jake's group was hit by the magic, screaming in panic. "What is he doing?" One of them shouted. "The anti-magic is being reflected back." Jake still kept his attacking stance, roaring, "Don't be afraid, your emotions are interrupting the wave." He turned to Shirone, threatening, "Do you want to be crushed by the anti-magic?" On the other side, Shirone had gradually stood up straight, taking steps forward. With each step he took, the spirit domain became more and more solid. Shirone's spirit sphere swelled, hard as steel, emitting a brilliant light. Jake's group panicked, screaming, "Don't come any closer." The anti-magic now turned back to attack them. Jake's comrades held their heads, screaming in pain, "Save me!" Amy stood still, bewildered. What the hell is going on? The wind binding her suddenly loosened. She frowned, thinking, "Since I can't use the spirit domain, I don't understand what's going on." Her eyes were fixed on Shirone, filled with doubt and surprise. Amy's hands were freed, and she immediately felt her spirit realm return. "The magic resistance is gone," she muttered, landing lightly on the ground. Amy looked at Shirone's spirit realm in front of her in shock, her eyes filled with astonishment. Impossible. A spirit realm as cold and hard as this really exists? Shirone stood there, blood running down his nose, his tired eyes looking at the ground. He whispered, "I feel like something is wriggling under my feet." His spirit realm pressed down on the magic resistance as if he was standing on a small, weakly struggling worm. Jake, shattered by his own forbidden technique, roared in indignation. "This doesn't make sense. Who's playing with me?" He looked at his comrades lying around, holding their heads and groaning, roaring, "There are 6 of us. How could we lose to a weakling like him?" Jake seemed to be going crazy, his eyes bloodshot from defeat. He started slandering, pointing at Shirone. "That's right, that bastard. He must have done something dirty." Jake roared, his voice full of resentment. "He must be a student specializing in anti-magic. That's why he was specially admitted to the academy." He stood up, activated his spirit domain, his eyes flashing with fire. "You think you can beat me with combat magic?" Shirone stood still, her heart filled with confusion. This is big trouble. Opposite. Jake was preparing to unleash 2 wind blade attacks, the sharp wind blades flashing. Shirone panicked and thought, I don't know how to use magic at all." Jake laughed loudly, triumphantly. "I'll cut," but before he could finish, he received a punch from Amy, falling to the ground, flying several meters away. Before Jake could regain his composure, Amy rushed over, throwing another punch straight to his face. She roared and cursed. "You're done for, you bastard." Shirone rushed over, trying to stop Amy, who was going crazy, beating Jake half to death. "Senior, calm down." But Amy still did not stop punching and shouting, "What are you going to do to me? Say it again." Amy hit Jake repeatedly, as if she wanted to vent all her anger. She kept shouting, "Say it again, you damn bastard." Shirone stood by, crying without tears, thinking, if she uses this kind of scheme again, he'll really die. He used all his strength to pull Amy back, pleading, "Please, calm down." After a while of struggling, the forest fell silent. Shirone gasped, turned to Amy, and asked worriedly, "Are you okay?" But Amy just lay motionless on top of him, not responding. Shirone called out again, his voice urgent, "Senior." Finally, he realized that Amy had fainted. Shirone shouted in panic, "Wake up, Senior! Senior!" In the middle of the forest, both Shirone and the thugs were lying around. Shirone looked at Amy, who was unconscious on top of him, and muttered, "I didn't expect her to be unconscious like this. Is she exhausted?" He was speechless for a moment, then whispered, "Thank you, Senior." Shirone's voice trailed off. "I heard you came here to save me." Suddenly, Amy jumped up like a spring. She shouted, her voice filled with excitement, "I feel so refreshed now." Amy turned around and looked at Shirone with a look of both surprise and annoyance. "That's right. How dare you come here and confront all of them when you're so weak?" Shirone was pushed hard by Amy, holding his stomach and kneeling on the ground, thinking to himself, as expected, she's not commendable at all. Amy cleared her throat, her tone commanding, "All right, hurry up and get out of here. If the teacher catches us now, we'll be in big trouble." She held out her hand. Shirone grabbed Amy's hand, stood up, and said, "Senior Cerielle must have reported this to the teacher by now. I told her to do it." Amy was startled, her eyes widening. "What?" "I told Cerielle not to do that. Why?" Shirone also loudly replied, "What else can we do? It was an emergency situation just now." Amy held her head, frustrated. That's because you don't understand how things will go here. Things will be much more complicated if the school gets involved in things like this. Amy yelled, her voice filled with anger. Magi never let anything go until they thoroughly investigate it. In other words, they won't let this go. She glared at Shirone. Do you want our secret to be exposed? Shirone replied, his voice no less harsh. Do you think that's the biggest problem now? We're lucky to be alive. Jake, who was lying on one side, overheard the argument and muttered, Secret? Amy gritted her teeth and interrupted. Damn it, let's think about the consequences later. Let's run away first. Shirone was bewildered and asked as he ran, What else are we running away from? Suddenly, a bright pink light shone down from above, causing both of them to freeze. Amy gritted her teeth and prayed silently, Please, be an older teacher. An easygoing older teacher might just let it go. They just say, surely this kind of thing could happen. But the people who appeared were two terrifying figures. Thad the Fire, a 6th class certified magician, and Sienna the Ice, also a 6th class certified magician. As soon as Amy saw them, she held her head and groaned, I'm dead. The two most hot-tempered advisors in the academy, they really couldn't be worse. Cerielle rushed over, worried. Amy, are you okay? She grabbed Amy's shoulders, shook her violently, and said in a panic, Are you hurt? What happened to your head? Amy was stunned and replied, It's fine. How did you get here so quickly? On the other side, Thad had already prepared his magic. A fireball shot straight up into the sky, emitting a brilliant light. Shirone looked at Thad in admiration. That's the Blazing Sunday. I heard that it's an extremely difficult magic to use. Through the light from the magic, Thad saw 6 of Jake's men lying unconscious on the ground. He shouted loudly, his voice filled with anger. What the hell happened here? Thad frowned, turned to look at Amy and Shirone, startling both of them. He walked over, grabbed Amy's shoulders, shook her gently, and said sternly, Amy, how did an excellent student like you get into such a messy situation? Then he softened his voice, worriedly asking, Are you hurt? Shirone stood next to him, listening with a frown. Thad turned to him and said, Shirone, the teachers came here because they heard you two were in danger. Can you explain the situation clearly? Shirone nodded, opening his mouth. It's because... But before he could finish his sentence, Jake interrupted. He, his face bruised, shuffled forward and said, Let me. I believe I can explain everything to the teachers. Jake cleared his throat, his voice calm. To be honest, because of a little personal grudge, I requested a duel. It's quite common at our impulsive age. Sienna looked at Jake coldly, her eyes as sharp as knives. A duel, right? I heard you received a threatening letter. Not to mention, she glanced down at Jake's comrades lying on the ground, her voice fierce. I saw you using anti-magic. You're not going to say you don't know the academy rules, are you? Jake was startled and quickly defended himself. That's because Amy is too strong. I just used it as a way to deal with it. He spoke boldly, pointing at himself. Look, we're the ones who suffered the most. Jake patted his chest, confident. Not to mention, it was Amy who broke the rules before attacking me in the library. That's why I suggested a duel. Don't you find it strange that Amy didn't immediately report this to the teacher? Amy heard Jake brazenly change black to white and angrily shouted, What nonsense are you talking about? Amy shouted, her voice filled with indignation. You were the one who threatened me in the library. And this time, you even wrote a letter saying that you kidnapped Shirone. Jake interrupted, his voice smooth. But in fact, we didn't kidnap him. Today, you were the one who attacked us first. He pointed straight at Shirone. Moreover, Shirone didn't report anything to the teacher and immediately ran here. That proves that you two are hiding some secret. He raised his voice, triumphant. Do you understand? The guilty ones must be those two. Jake pointed at Amy and Shirone resolutely. The ones who deserve to be punished are those two. Thad turned to look at Shirone, his eyes stern. Amy gritted her teeth, growling, You bastard. Jake grinned. Now what? Why don't you two reveal the secret right here? Jake curled his lips, his voice full of mockery. What? He sneered inwardly. Now do you understand the fear of a dark mage? In his mind, Jake silently calculated, I will exaggerate this matter. I don't care how much money it costs. As long as I dig up your precious secret, I will spread the news to the local newspapers, the national agencies, and even the church. Your secret will spread everywhere. But Professor Sienna interrupted his crazy train of thought. The surrounding air suddenly turned cold. She said, her voice cold. You can stop talking nonsense now. The cold wind blew in gusts, carrying Sienna's seriousness. She continued, You and your friends used magic resistance. Not only that, you went beyond the limit, using it to attack others. Sienna looked at Shirone, her voice low but sharp. You know that Shirone or Amy's mind may have been damaged. They may even have completely lost their minds. Shirone gritted her teeth, thinking to herself. My life, Sienna's eyes turned icy blue, cold to the bone. She continued, just these actions alone are enough to expel you from the academy. Jake patted his chest, laughed loudly, his voice full of arrogance. A lowly advisor dares to ask to expel me? Thad hurriedly walked over, whispering to Sienna, Teacher, the Ardias family is almost the lifeblood of the academy. Without their sponsorship, even our salaries, Sienna interrupted, her voice cold as ice. Isn't our role as advisors to guide students on the right path? She looked at Thad, her eyes unwavering. If you can't do that, then what are you doing here? Sienna coldly continued, then you better pack up and leave this academy right now. Jake laughed loudly, his voice full of arrogance. All right, let's see if I get expelled or you get fired first. He tried to open his swollen eyes wide, staring at Sienna. This world runs on money. In front of money, everyone has to bow their heads. Sienna's face became increasingly gloomy. Jake continued to talk nonstop. You should take this opportunity to understand more clearly how the world works. Sienna replied, her voice light but sharp. Before that, she raised her hand high. Looks like I still have to teach you a lesson. An ice pillar slowly rose up. The wind blew fiercely, making it impossible for anyone to open their eyes. Shirone was amazed, exclaiming, so cool. Amy squinted, muttering, how did things come to this? Thad called out in panic, Teacher! Thad quickly stopped him, his voice panicked. You can't just treat a student like that. But the next second, Jake was surrounded by a giant block of ice, as if he was trapped in a frozen pine tree. Countless ice spikes were pointed straight at his face, sparkling in the light. Shirone opened his mouth and exclaimed, Impressive! She didn't even touch a single strand of cloth on his clothes. He thought to himself, this proves that she has sophisticated control of magic down to the smallest detail. Shirone was stunned, thinking to himself, so that's why she's called a genius ice mage. Sienna looked at Jake, her voice cold. Jake, do you really think everything can be solved with money? Jake, still stubborn, shouted, Stop talking nonsense. Quickly dispel this ice magic. Sienna snapped her fingers, and the ice block shattered instantly. She said slowly, her voice firm, We already know that you have harmed many other students. Sienna looked at Jake, her voice stern, but the academy has been hesitant to punish your wrongdoings. Jake knelt on the ground, his lips curled. That was thanks to my family sponsorship, right? Sienna shouted, Don't be mistaken. She continued, her voice firm. The academy is not a place where teachers teach for money. We teach you lessons that money can never buy. Jake hesitated, muttering, What the hell is that? Sienna replied, her eyes sharp. That's what I dreamed of becoming, she asked seriously. Don't you want to become a magician? The words seemed to wake Jake up. He suddenly remembered the image of himself in the past, standing in front of Sienna, enthusiastically declaring, Teacher Sienna, if you help me get to 5th grade, I will become a great magician and repay you, Sienna continued. The dream you shared with your friends, have you forgotten it? Sienna looked at Jake, her voice low but meaningful. You guys are studying together to become magicians. Isn't that why you decided to come to this academy? Jake was bewildered, his eyes empty. The image of the past came back to him, the boy Jake and his friends, innocently dreaming of becoming magicians until they grew up, lost in ambition and money. Sienna asked softly but seriously, Do you really want to destroy everything you've built with your own hands just because of these mistakes? Jake was silent, his head bowed. After a long while, he mumbled, Teacher. Then he fell to the ground, his voice trembling. I'm sorry. Shirone raised his head to look at the sky, his heart heavy. He thought about what was most important to him, his dream, his beliefs, and what he had fought to protect. In the punishment room, screams rang out. It hurts. Be gentle with me. Don't overdo it. It's just a spell. In the end, what had to happen happened. In the conference room, Shirone and Amy sat across from each other, the atmosphere tense. Thad spoke up, his voice stern. Thad looked at Shirone, his voice even but stern. Shirone, why didn't you immediately report to the teacher when something like this happened? The first thing you should have done was to report to us. But instead, you rushed to save a senior student who was many grades above you. Such an action cannot be considered a reasonable explanation. Amy and Shirone glanced at each other, both speechless. The atmosphere in the conference room was heavy. After a long while, Amy spoke, her voice firm. I understand. I will answer honestly. Shirone looked at her thinking, That's right. How can we hide this forever? Even though we don't know who leaked it to the principal. Amy paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and then said, Actually, Shirone was nervous, his heart pounding, thinking, my identity. But Amy suddenly winked, smiling mischievously, my boyfriend. As soon as the sentence ended, Thad, Sienna, and Cerielle all opened their mouths, stunned as if they couldn't believe their ears. The screams echoed throughout the academy. What? The loud noises continued, as if the whole school was in an uproar. Help me! Is anyone there? In Amy's imagination, she turned into a princess tied up by a thorny rose bush, crying out in despair, "Please save me." The Jakes, like evil blacks, laughed. Who would come to this remote mountain to save you? You should have accepted our feelings, then this wouldn't have happened. Suddenly a horse neighed loudly. The blacks were startled. Who is it? They turned around, stunned by a white horse that was shining brightly. A voice spoke confidently. Who else is here? Shirone appeared, like a prince riding a white horse, kicking the bad guy down. The hooligans shouted in panic. Behind them. Amy, hanging from a tree, asked in confusion, "Who are you?" Shirone swung his sword, cutting the rose thorns that bound her, and said affectionately, "I'm here, Amy." He gently carried Amy like a princess. Amy called out, her voice trembling, "Shirone." Shirone looked at her, his eyes sweet. "Amy." Shirone and Amy passionately called each other's names. "Shirone! Amy!" The surrounding students shouted excitedly, "No way! Really?" The girls looked at Shirone standing in front of them, their eyes sparkling. "So romantic." Shirone nodded, smiling confidently. "Of course, it's all true." One girl affirmed, "I saw it with my own eyes." Suddenly, Amy appeared behind her. Her gloomy voice rang out, "Shirone." Her voice echoed throughout the academy, filled with anger. "What kind of rumors are you spreading? I know you've been addicted to cheesy romance novels lately, but this is unacceptable." On the academy's bulletin board, a notice was posted solemnly, clearly stating, "Official notice regarding the punishment related to the Academy Research Club's misconduct, specifically the club's violent behavior and many other violations with accompanying photographic evidence." The bulletin board was still there, but the rumor spread like wildfire. The entire academy was abuzz with the headline, "The Goddess of Alpheus, Amy Karmis, admits to dating new student Shirone Ariane." People whispered that Amy had made their relationship public to save Shirone, the boy she loved, from a vicious and wrongful siege. Young love like a miracle blossomed the moment they were together. The anti-dark magic was defeated as easily as a fairy tale. What is the new student's true identity? That question made the whole school curious. There was even a rumor that Amy and Shirone had shared a passionate kiss under the moonlight in the middle of a deserted forest. In the schoolyard, the girls kept exclaiming, "Oh my God, I'm so jealous." But then Amy's voice rang out, cold as ice. "Cerielle, are you tired of living?" she exhaled, glaring at her friend. "You never saw it with your own eyes." Cerielle giggled, excited, as if she had just discovered a huge secret. "Why do I need to see to know? You said you two were dating, so there's no way they wouldn't kiss, right?" Amy just glared at her friend, her eyes burning, but Cerielle still giggled, not afraid at all. Cerielle laughed triumphantly. "I've calculated everything. With this rumor, no annoying male student will dare to approach you again." Amy clicked her tongue and shrugged. "That's right, that part is reasonable." A few days ago, when the incident had not yet subsided, Thad slammed the table and glared at Amy. "You're lying, right?" He shouted loudly, questioning, "The Amy I know. How could she be interested in dating anyone? This is so absurd. Moreover, Shirone is just a transfer student." Amy calmly said, her voice as calm as if nothing had happened, "Actually, I've known Shirone since I was little. But meeting each other again at the Magic Academy like this, you could say it's fate." She turned around, brushed her hair, and smiled slyly at Shirone. "Right, Shirone?" Shirone whispered hesitantly, "Then how will you take responsibility for?" But before he could finish, he received a painful kick from Amy under the table, leaving him speechless, hugging his leg and grimacing. Shirone nodded quickly, her voice trembling slightly. "That's right." Thad and Sienna looked at each other speechless. Thad muttered, "Is that why?" No wonder he rushed to save Amy like that. Amy thought to herself, trying to keep her face calm. Pretending to be lovers is better than letting our past be exposed. Cerielle, still excited as if she had just discovered a shocking secret, giggled, "I knew it. It was strange from the beginning." "What is this?" "Amy, you're really silly." Amy was speechless, took a sip of water, trying not to reply. Cerielle continued, her eyes shining. "There's a joint class today, right? You'll meet Shirone." She forgot to eat, excitedly asking, "Do you have a date to meet him after school? Have dinner together? Or do you like to secretly date in the library?" Amy replied blandly, "We just focus on studying like usual." Cerielle rested her chin on her hand and sighed, "So boring." Amy smiled wryly, thinking to herself, "I have a ton of work to do." Amy thought to herself, clenching her fists, "There's no point in wasting time on that fake love affair." Shirone, too. That useless guy is probably enjoying a normal school life, carefree and innocent as if nothing happened. But then she suddenly stopped. A feeling of unease crept in. Wait, why am I so upset about this? At the training area of the Intermediate 2 combined class, a voice called out, "Shirone!" Cerielle happily waved. "Over here." Shirone smiled, raising his hand to greet. "Hello, senior." Cerielle excitedly ran over, her voice teasing. "Hey, how are you today? Did you miss Amy a lot?" Shirone scratched his head, smiling awkwardly. "Senior is so funny." Amy stood there, covering her mouth, her eyes flashing. "So that's it. It's him." She thought, annoyed, he should be grateful for pretending to be my lover. But look at him, so carefree. Shouldn't he feel pressured when standing next to me? How dare he treat me like this? Amy cleared her throat, attracting Shirone's gaze. She patted his shoulder, her tone gentle but meaningful. "When it's just the two of us, you can talk to us freely. Don't be so formal about seniors and juniors. After all, we understand each other too well." Cerielle stood beside her, her eyes wide with surprise. "Oh my God, this is the first time I've seen Amy say something like this. Could this be the power of love?" Amy glanced at Cerielle and continued. "Considering our relationship," Shirone quickly smiled and interrupted. "Ah, no, I'm fine. You're still a senior after all," he added, his voice hurried. "It's time for class. I'll go first." After saying that, Shirone quickly ran off, leaving Amy standing there. Cerielle waved excitedly. "Okay, bye." Amy turned around, intending to walk away. Cerielle quickly called out, "Amy!" She turned back, looked at Shirone, who had disappeared, and muttered, "What happened?" In class, Shirone pulled up a chair and sat down, still a bit confused by the conversation just now. Shirone sat still, silently enduring the harsh words directed at him. "Congratulations, congratulations. You must be so smug, right? You came to class just to act out your love life? You have no skills at all. Did you get into the academy with that face?" Countless contemptuous gazes were directed at him, as if Shirone only knew how to date and didn't bother studying. He remained silent, listening to the people whispering, "He doesn't even know anything about spells." Shirone's hands on his thighs clenched tightly, trembling with resentment. It all started 2 days ago, when the rumor spread like wildfire. On the bulletin board, the words about Amy and Shirone became the center of attention. In the 7th grade classroom, a student ran in shouting, "Everyone, have you heard the news?" The crowd was noisily discussing, "Senior Amy and the new student are dating." Another person added, "I heard they even admitted it in front of the teacher." In the corner, a few male students hugged each other, crying and comforting, "Oh my God, my Amy." The rumor was like a tsunami, sweeping the entire academy into a never-ending storm of gossip. A male student shouted, his voice filled with resentment, "No way! Senior Amy should be mine! Someone like you has no chance!" He patted the shoulder of the person next to him, comforting him. "Cry on my shoulder." A girl nearby sighed, annoyed. "So annoying. Thinking about the two most outstanding people in the academy becoming a couple, it's really annoying. I was even planning to take that new student." Maria sat listening to everyone laughing and chatting. She smiled slightly, saying, "It's understandable. Like-minded people meet like-minded people. Obviously, we should congratulate him." Suddenly, a voice rang out beside her, making Maria jump. "But isn't there something strange?" The whole class turned around, looking at the person who had just spoken. A short-haired girl frowned. "What do you mean?" The newcomer, a male student, slammed a piece of paper on the table, his voice fierce. "I'm talking about the new student. Look at this." The crowd gathered around, curious. "What is it? What's going on? What is this?" The paper clearly read, "Midterm 1A." Everyone looked attentively, their eyes filled with doubt, whispering and gossiping. The score sheet caused a stir in the class. Shirone was at the bottom of the class, with only 30 points in every subject. One person exclaimed in surprise, "What? Wasn't he at the top?" The gazes of everyone looking at Shirone gradually changed, filled with doubt. "That's why it seems like he really doesn't know anything about spells," one student muttered. Another student, still in disbelief, asked, "How is that possible?" The big guy standing nearby curled his lips, "And yet he still got special admission. There's something fishy going on here, right?" He continued to say malicious things. "He must have relied on his family's backing. He spread the news that he was a genius and then seduced a young lady from a prestigious family like Senior Amy," he exclaimed, his voice full of sarcasm. "The world is truly unfair. A rich kid who only knows how to play entered the academy to find a girlfriend, that's all." These words were like pouring oil on the fire, igniting the anger of the whole group. Another person chimed in, "You mean he got in here through connections? Now that I think about it, it really is suspicious." The whispers grew louder, and eyes turned to Shirone with contempt and suspicion. The whole class started to boil, pretending to be righteous, unanimously wanting to eliminate Shirone. "For the sake of all our futures, we must expel that filthy thing from the academy. Never forgive him." The chants rang out. Maria sat silently in a corner, listening quietly, saying nothing. The classroom door was pushed open, but angry voices were still buzzing inside. How could the academy let such an injustice happen? Shirone stood outside, quietly looking into the classroom. How strange he thought it was clearly so noisy and lively just now. The sudden silence made him confused. Shirone walked in, trying to strike up a conversation with his desk mate. What's the lesson next class? But his friend just walked away silently, not bothering to reply. Shirone was speechless, his heart heavy. I guess there's no need to ask why they're acting like that, he thought to himself. All around, the students whispered, intentionally letting him hear. Because of him, even Senior Amy was implicated. The words were like knives stabbing straight into Shirone, leaving him standing there, helpless. In the practice room, the class spirit domain class was going on. Shirone stood alone, trying to concentrate on his spirit domain. But the mocking words from around him still reached his ears. Why is he practicing here too? Another person whispered, intentionally letting him hear, his spirit domain is facing me. It's really disgusting. The students kept showing their malice, criticizing his spirit domain is too flashy. Suddenly, Professor Othello walked over and called out, Shirone, how is it? Shirone quickly turned around and happily asked, Teacher, the direction change is too difficult. When I tried to move my spirit domain out of my body, it felt like my consciousness was also pulled along. Othello smiled gently and said, that feeling is normal, Shirone. Your convergent spirit domain is a natural flow, so it will be more sensitive to changes in consciousness. Just be patient. You will master it. Shirone nodded, his eyes flashing with determination, even as the malicious words still echoed around him. Othello continued, her voice soft. So it will drag your consciousness along. The redirection form is to separate the spirit realm from the body. So it is not very compatible with your natural flow. Shirone nodded. I feel the same way. Othello asked further. What about your other 4 forms? Shirone pondered for a moment. The other forms? No problem, I guess. Othello smiled. Very good. Then do you want to try practicing in the shadow realm? Shirone was surprised, his eyes wide. What? He was confused. Right now? Othello reassured. If you are not comfortable, you can do it next time. Shirone was speechless, not answering. She continued, her voice encouraging. Shirone, you are the only student in the 7th grade who can convert all 4 forms. I just want to see you try it once. Othello looked at Shirone, her eyes worried but full of expectation. She recalled, from the very first day, this student expressed a desire to try his hand at the field, a technique that even veteran students were wary of. Othello looked at Shirone, thinking to herself, could it be that he's worried about the other student's eyes? Shirone thought to himself, now is not the time to be emotional. People who believe in their own worth will not be easily swayed by slander. After a moment of contemplation, he raised his head, his voice firm. I'll try. Please give me your feedback. The 7th graders immediately threw malicious looks at Shirone. One muttered, he's still planning on doing it. Another joined in, his voice sarcastic. He just wants to show off in front of his lover. They looked at Shirone standing in the abyss, not showing any respect. He's not good at anything other than that anyway. Othello smiled, her voice reassuring. Just try each form one by one, switching between the 4 forms in turn. Shirone nodded. Yes. He took a deep breath, concentrating. One of the important criteria for being evaluated for promotion was mastering the spirit realm transfer, and Shirone knew this was her chance to prove herself despite the ridicule around her. Shirone thought to himself, if I succeed now, I'll be one step closer to moving up a grade. The 4th graders watched, waiting to laugh at him, except for Amy and Cerielle. One of them whispered, how much better can he be? But Shirone only hoped for one thing. Maybe I won't have to face the 7th graders again and get out of this situation. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Shirone's spirit field immediately appeared in the image, starting with defensive form. Amy's eyes widened in surprise, even stronger than when I faced the dark mage. A male student exclaimed, 144 sides. This is a high-level defensive form. The 7th graders fell silent, listening to the comments about Shirone. One muttered, at that level, it's no different from an armored wall. Shirone's spirit field transformed, turning into an asterisk shape, then rotating, turning into a cross shape, smooth and precise. The whole practice room held its breath, eyes glued to his every move. Othello smiled, her voice filled with satisfaction. This student really has a very solid foundation. His transformation speed is far superior to that of the 7th grade. With this level, promotion to the 4th grade is completely within reach. Shirone stood in the spirit realm, exhaling, thinking to himself, although I really want to prove my success, in order to receive advice from the professor, I have to dare to show failure. His spirit realm began to waver. The 5th graders were bewildered, whispering, he switched to the redirection form? That form is only for the 5th graders to learn. The 7th graders frowned, muttering, the redirection form, could it be? Shirone concentrated intensely, trying to move the center of gravity of the spirit realm. But before he could finish, the spirit realm retracted and disappeared completely. He held his head, panting, sweat rolling down, still like when I practiced. Too exhausting. The room fell silent, eyes focused on Shirone, both surprised and curious at his effort to surpass his level. Shirone muttered, trying to calm himself down. I can move the center of gravity of the spirit domain, but the further away from my body, the more my consciousness feels like it's being dragged along. He cheered himself up. Let's do it again. But around him, the students started to cover their mouths and giggle. Malicious gossips rang out as if they were just waiting for this opportunity to bring him down. What is he doing? Does he think he's a genius? So conceited, isn't he handsome? He's really shameless. He even dares to stand there. Shirone's face darkened, standing silently in the middle of the room. The students continued to mock him. That thing is just the 4 basic forms. Amy, unable to bear it, spoke up. Hey, he's doing so well. Why is he suddenly like this? Cerielle looked at Shirone's spirit domain, curious. Look, why is his spirit domain shaking? She turned to Amy and asked, is he embarrassed by the attention? Amy shook her head, her voice firm. No way. Shirone isn't that kind of weak boy, she muttered, her eyes glued to him. What's going on with him? Shirone lowered his head, standing silently in the middle of the room, his heart heavy. What's going on lately? He wondered, why do people enjoy other people's failures? No, don't they just want to see me fail? The feeling of isolation surrounded him, making Shirone start to doubt himself. Memories from his childhood to adulthood rushed back, repeating in his head like an old movie, am I not suitable for this place? Suddenly a voice rang out, startling Shirone. You're thinking too much. The voice continued, clear and determined. Don't hesitate. Do whatever you want to do. Shirone was stunned, listening. Didn't you want to become a mage? He was confused, muttering, Who? Who is that? But then, as if awakened, Shirone said to himself, No, wait, what am I thinking? He closed his eyes tightly, taking a deep breath. Shirone's spirit field flared up strongly, more brilliant than ever. I came here to become a mage, he roared inwardly, his eyes flashing with determination, dispelling all doubts. The 4th graders gaped at Shirone's brilliant spirit field. Meanwhile, the 7th graders were visibly upset, whispering in dissatisfaction. Shirone stood in the middle of the spirit field, clenching his fists, concentrating intensely. Before it changes direction, before it disappears, he said to himself, then shouted loudly, his voice echoing. Meanwhile, in another room, Sienna flipped through the incident report. The document stated, an accident involving students, in which 6 perpetrators had intentionally damaged the victims' minds by using excessive anti-magica, magic forbidden in the academy. But what caught Sienna's attention was the detail. 7th grader Shirone overpowered anti-magic with a defensive form. The person reading the report mused. He countered anti-magic with just a defensive formone of the 4 basic forms? Sienna fell into thought. Anti-magic was a dangerous type of magic, to the point that even experts had to use artifacts to deal with it. Not only was it difficult, it was also risky. How did Shirone do that? She wondered, her eyes flashing with curiosity and amazement. Sienna continued to flip through the report, thinking to herself, an artifact is an object imbued with magical power, allowing even ordinary people to use magic-like powers. She was certain there's no way those kids would use anti-magic properly. But for Shirone to fight against 6 people alone, Sienna pondered, his mental strength must be greater than the combined strength of all 6 people. She exclaimed, her eyes flashing, what a genius. Suddenly, a voice rang out, Miss Sienna. In the office, Sienna raised her head, looking at Athela. Has Shirone successfully transformed into a redirection form? Athela nodded, smiling. Yes, just yesterday. He just started learning the 4-way conversion a month ago. She continued, I have confirmed that his spiritual domain split and disappeared, lasting about 4 seconds. Sienna was happy, lifted her teacup and took a sip, thinking to herself, my eye for people is indeed not wrong. A satisfied smile appeared on her lips, her eyes filled with expectation towards Shirone. Athela continued, her voice excited. So, in order to encourage students' motivation to study, I have a few suggestions to share with you teachers. Sienna pushed up her glasses, smiling. I guess we're thinking the same thing. A few days later, in 7th grade chemistry class, Sienna filled the board with complex chemical formulas. She stopped writing and announced, today's class will end here. The students breathed a sigh of relief, whispering, thank goodness. But Sienna continued, her voice serious. The reason I'm ending early is because I have a special announcement. She called out, Shirone, new student, please stand up. Shirone quickly stood up, a little embarrassed. Sienna smiled. Student Shirone will be specially promoted to 5th grade. Starting tomorrow, your timetable will be according to 5th grade. Try to adapt. The entire 7th grade class immediately erupted into an uproar. Did you hear that? He was promoted 2 grades in a row. Impossible. It normally takes 2 years to move up a grade. There were murmurs, mixed with surprise and jealousy, while Shirone stood there, her eyes filled with both surprise and determination. The entire 7th grade class was in an uproar, with only one thought in mind: which family supported him to be promoted 2 levels in a row. Sienna picked up the book, preparing to leave, saying, "I hope you guys will work hard to achieve such results." Okay. But before she could step out, a short-haired female student who had always openly ostracized Shirone spoke up. "Wait, teacher, I object. There has never been a precedent for being promoted 2 levels at once. There is something fishy here," she questioned loudly. "Moreover, why did a student who couldn't use any magic get promoted early?" Sienna stopped thinking, "Can't use magic?" She raised her head to look at Shirone, remembering Othello never mentioned this. Sienna asked, her voice low, "Is that true, Shirone?" Shirone stood still, speechless. Countless gazes in the class turned towards him, cold and full of suspicion, as if to force him to speak. The atmosphere in the classroom was heavy. Everyone waited for Shirone's answer, their eyes clearly filled with mockery and defiance. A student shouted, his voice full of sarcasm, "You obviously have nothing. Tell me, how did you level up?" Shirone calmly replied, her voice even, "Yes, I haven't used any magic yet." Sienna was slightly surprised, her eyes flashing with astonishment. Unbelievable! Even a simple magic, anyone can learn it out of curiosity. But she quickly regained her composure, saying, "However, there are no rules that require using magic to level up. So, there is no problem here." As soon as Sienna finished speaking, a loud bang on the table rang out. The tall student who had once provoked the entire class to ostracize Shirone stood up, roaring, "Absolutely unacceptable. This is clearly biased. Didn't the teachers themselves say that the spirit realm isn't everything to magic?" Shirone stood still, silently listening to the vicious questioning. The other guy's eyes were blazing as if he wanted to devour him, while the whole class was silent, waiting for Shirone's reaction. The tall guy pointed at Shirone, his voice full of challenge. "What is Shirone good at outside of the spirit realm? If he can do even one spell, I will accept it." The 7th graders were fired up and they all chimed in. "That's right, if he can do a spell, we are 10,000 times more confident than him." Another person added, "How can Shirone keep up with the theory class?" They turned to Sienna, their voices fierce. "If you still insist on promoting him early, we will propose to the student council and request a hearing." Sienna was speechless, thinking, "I didn't know things would go this far." She took a deep breath and said, "I understand your thoughts. It seems I was hasty with this announcement." She continued, her voice calm. "We will reconsider and make an official announcement after the teachers' meeting." The tall guy curled his lips, smiling triumphantly at achieving his goal. Sienna sat in her office, looking out at the sky outside, muttering, "Why are the students so agitated?" Her eyes were thoughtful, as if searching for an answer to the unusual tension in the classroom. Sienna pondered, muttering, "It's not just protesting injustice. Those sounds were also mixed with personal emotions." At that moment, a voice rang out, "Miss Sienna." Sienna raised her head. "What happened, Maria?" Maria hesitated, her voice trembling. "What happened just now? I have something to say," she slowly said. "It all started a week ago. At first, we completely ignored Shirone." Sienna recalled his lonely appearance in class. Maria continued, "But a few days ago, people started openly bad-mouthing him, even littering Shirone's desk. The girl sat in front of Sienna, her voice choked up. They even disturbed his studies." Maria burst into tears, tears rolling down her face. "I saw it all. I saw him suffer from false rumors and attacks from everyone. The way they bullied Shirone, it was so unfair." Sienna was silent, her eyes heavy, as if trying to digest what Maria had just said. Maria sobbed, her whole body trembling. Sienna gently placed her hand on her shoulder, her eyes calm but full of sympathy. I understand. That's how it is." She frowned, her heart heavy. After a while, Sienna said, "Thank you, Maria. You were very brave. Now let me handle this." Sienna's mind flashed with an excerpt from the book Outstanding Students. Physiologist Thorpe Collin once said, his voice full of depth, "Human beings should sleep at least 6 hours a day to be at their best." He sighed, smiled. "Although I, during my school years, only slept 4 hours a day." The interviewer asked in surprise, "But doesn't that contradict your advice? You only slept 4 hours and still became an excellent student." Thorpe Collin pointed and laughed loudly. "Listen, people in their teens are not just human, they are superhuman. Whether they sleep or not, no matter what they do, nothing can stop them." Sienna closed her eyes, thinking about Shirone and the pressure he was under. "Superman or not, he's still just a student," she muttered, determined to act. When the clock struck 12, Shirone leaned back inside. He looked around. The campus was deserted. "It's that late," he muttered. When he passed a classmate who had just left the library, Shirone took the initiative to nod in greeting. Fortunately, she nodded politely in return, making him smile slightly. Shirone walked alone under the crescent moon, hanging high above. Tamura's words suddenly echoed in his mind. Young master, once you enter the Magic Academy, there will be many nobles who will look down on you. But no matter what, you must endure patiently. If you can hold on until the end, the sweet fruit will be yours. Shirone raised his head to look at the sky, his eyes determined. I will definitely do it. He thought of the people who had always believed in and supported him, and his heart was filled with determination. Among them, there was also Rian, who had sworn to be a knight, vowing to accompany him. For their sake, I cannot give up, Shirone whispered, her steps growing firmer under the moonlight. Shirone looked at the moon hanging high in the sky, determined. No matter who gets in my way, I will still become a magician. In the bedroom on the third floor of the dormitory, Shirone had just finished showering, his hair still wet. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. He hesitantly turned around thinking, it's so late, who could it be? The clock was already past 1 a.m. Shirone was puzzled. Could it be the 7th graders? A voice came from outside the door. Shirone, are you free? Shirone opened the door, surprised. Miss Sienna? She smiled slightly. Can I come in? Shirone quickly nodded. Of course. He awkwardly poured tea, inviting, would you like some tea? Sienna waved her hand. No need. I wanted to come earlier, but you weren't in the room. Sorry for disturbing you this late. Sienna glanced at Shirone's desk, her voice deep. When I first saw your grades, I felt something was strange. She stopped, her eyes sharp as if trying to see through him. Shirone paused, feeling slightly worried, waiting for her to continue. Sienna looked at Shirone, her voice deep. Even though your grades are low, all your subjects are equal. It seems like you tried to improve your knowledge in all areas at the same time, instead of chasing after immediate results. You study for the future. She paused, her eyes deep. It's not that you can't learn magic. It's that you chose not to learn it. But why now? Sienna thought to herself, could it be because he didn't go to school when he was young? Shirone sat upright in front of her, shyly thinking, God, I feel so embarrassed. The two sat across from each other, the atmosphere quiet. Shirone thought to herself, it must be because it's not during class. That's why I'm so embarrassed. Sienna quietly observed him. In class, Shirone was always focused, his eyes fixed on her. But now, she realized that he was the type of person who easily felt embarrassed when he was noticed outside of class. Sienna's eyes softened, as if to encourage Shirone to open up. Sienna asked softly, school life is hard, right? Shirone nodded, smiling slightly. Yes, but it's fun, and studying is very interesting. Sienna looked at him, her voice low. I heard that my classmates are bullying you. Shirone lowered his head, his voice low. I'm fine, teacher. You don't need to worry about me. Sienna was serious, her eyes determined. Tell me the truth. Don't be shy. Shirone nodded, hesitating. I'm really fine. It's just, I'm a little regretful that I haven't been able to make friends yet. He raised his head, his voice sincere. But I don't know what to do to make them hate me less. Sienna continued to ask. Aren't you angry with them? Shirone nodded slightly. Of course I am. After all, I'm only human. But I want to have a good relationship with them, he calmly added. However, I don't want to be obsessed with those relationships. Shirone looked at Sienna, his eyes clear but full of determination, as if to affirm that he would not let difficulties shake his goal. Shirone continued, his voice calm. I don't want to deny myself because of those relationships. Even if all 47th graders say I'm wrong, in the end, they're just 40 people. He looked at Sienna, his eyes determined. I believe that somewhere in this world, there will be someone who understands me. Sienna was silent, then smiled, nodded. I understand what you're saying. She looked at Shirone, her voice gentle. I'll take note of this in the teacher's meeting. In her heart, Sienna realized one thing clearly. Shirone longed for an early promotion, not only to prove himself, but also to find where he truly belonged. In the teacher's meeting, Sienna's voice rang out, serious and steady. Therefore, I propose to end the announcement with the idea that student Shirone should be promoted early. The professors were silent. One person spoke up. Isn't this a bit sensitive? The atmosphere in the meeting room became tense. Everyone's eyes turned to Sienna, waiting for her to explain further. In the council room of Alpheus Academy of Magic, the professors were arguing loudly. One was indignant. A whole group of students bullying a student just because he can't use magic yet? Another teacher, who taught the intermediate class, sighed. This often happens in the lower classes. Those classes have many young students, mixed with a few older students who lack talent. The skill gap at that level is often very large. A professor nodded. Therefore, Shirone needs to be promoted as soon as possible. For the sake of the students, he should graduate in the next 4 years. Sienna sat down, listening to her colleague continue. In terms of the Academy's interests, the sooner Shirone graduates, the more advantageous it is for us. But Thad suddenly stood up, his voice resolute. I object. Alpheus, who was sitting in the chair, raised his head, his eyes sharp. You object? He looked at Thad and asked, what is the reason? The entire conference room fell silent, all eyes on Thad, waiting for his explanation. Thad replied in a firm voice, I know Shirone is a genius, but the problem is that he can't use magic. Furthermore, his weak theoretical scores cannot be ignored. Sienna was annoyed and retorted. As I said, Shirone's low scores because he studies all areas equally at the same time, delaying his learning of magic. As teachers, we should not interfere with students' individual learning methods. I don't doubt his learning methods. Thad frowned, his voice harsh. The problem is that you are being too biased towards Shirone, Miss Sienna. The corners of Sienna's lips twitched. She gritted her teeth. What did you just say? Thad defended himself. Although other students may be weaker than Shirone in terms of omnipotence, they are still superior to him in terms of omniscience. The atmosphere in the conference room became even more tense. The professor's eyes wavered between Sienna and Thad, waiting for the next development of the debate. Thad sneered, his voice full of sarcasm. This kind of decision can make other students feel like failures and lose their will to study. A teacher shouldn't just focus on geniuses and forget about other students, right? Sienna jumped up and shouted, not only do you want to ruin the future of a talented student, but you also don't realize the wrong jealousy of those students. Thad and Sienna banged on the table. The sound of bangs and bangs echoed throughout the room. The other teachers held their heads and sighed, here we go again. How can these two people's personalities be so opposite as water and fire? Some professors looked at Sienna a level 6 certificate and Thad also a level 6 certificate, arguing fiercely, exclaiming, I can't believe they became magicians. Alpheus raised his hand, his voice authoritative. Enough, both of you, go back to your seats. He said in a low voice, both of you have your own reasons. The meeting room was silent. All eyes were on Alpheus, waiting for his final decision. Alpheus mused. Sienna's point is very meaningful, but Mr. Thad's opinion is also reasonable. He cares about the overall balance of the academy, and I believe that comes from his love for the students. Thad nodded, his voice triumphant. That's exactly what I wanted to say, headmaster. Sienna listened, her eyes slightly annoyed. But Alpheus smiled, his voice gentle but authoritative. Instead of arguing, why don't we do this? The entire conference room fell silent, everyone attentively waiting for his proposal. Alpheus, with a meaningful expression, prepared to present a solution that would make everyone ponder.